Today we are starting the Latin America unit. Hopefully yesterday after the Chapter 11 test, you took the pre-test that was on Canvas. It was a Google form. I just wanted that as a reference point, and now we're going to discuss those questions. All right, one of the questions in the pre-test was name the entire area found south of the U.S. It's called Latin America. It's not called Latin America because they speak Latin, but because those people, we refer them to as Latinos. Latin America is divided into three parts. Middle America, in Chapter 11 they called it Mesoamerica. It's made up of Mexico and Central America. You have the Caribbean islands, which are also called the West Indies, and South America. The major language is Spanish, and not every country speaks Spanish. The major religion is Roman Catholic, and once again, not every country practices Catholicism. The two major mountain ranges, Sierra Madres in Mexico and Central America, and those actually split off into two. On the west side, it's the Sierra Madres Occidental, and on the right side, or on the east side, it is the Sierra Madres Oriental. In South America, the Andes, and that runs along the whole western coast of the continent. The longest river in this region is the Amazon River. The Amazon is not the longest in the world, but it's the longest in this region. And the country that settled or colonized most of these countries is Spain. Now, questions 3, 4, and 7 are connected because Spain settled them, therefore they speak Spanish and they practice the same religion of Roman Catholic. Not every country was colonized by Spain, though, and so not all of them practice Catholicism or speak Spanish. For example, Jamaica, Bahamas, Belize, they all speak English. And as a matter of fact, Belize used to be called British Honduras until 1975. You have countries in South America that speak Dutch or French, or Brazil, Portuguese. All right, so turn to the map in your packets, and we're going to label these. And just like going through the pre-test questions, I'm going to talk more than just label the maps. You're only going to need to know the maps as far as the countries and their locations, but I have put the reference point up here of the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean Sea, and the Pacific Ocean, so you know where that is. All right, first one, and one I would assume that you already know where it's located, is Mexico. And that was mentioned in Chapter 11, so you should be pretty familiar with where it's located and so forth. Then we have Guatemala, which is just south of Mexico, and Belize, which is also south of Mexico. So those two countries border Mexico to Mexico's southern border. Remember, Belize is one of those countries that speaks English, and as a matter of fact, there is some of the best snorkeling and scuba diving off the coast of Belize because they have coral reefs very similar to Australia's Great Barrier Reef, but at a smaller scale. The next one is Honduras, and then the little one that only borders the Pacific Ocean, it doesn't have a Caribbean border, is El Salvador. The next one is Nicaragua. And you can see here in Nicaragua, there is this large lake. As a matter of fact, there are two lakes in Nicaragua. One is called Lake Nicaragua, and the other one is called Lake Managua. One named after the country, one named after the capital. Currently, there is a system, a process that they're talking about right now, that they are going to make a canal across Nicaragua to connect the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean, and they would cut through those lakes so that they wouldn't have to, gouge out as much land because it's already water. But that's in the process, and that may or may not happen, but it's a possibility. Costa Rica is next. And then the last country in Middle America is Panama, and of course there's already a canal in Panama that the U.S. completed and has now relinquished control to the country of Panama. For a long time, the United States kind of protected it and governed it, but now it's Panama's. Next, we're moving up here to the Caribbean islands. So once again, these blue areas are just reference points. You don't need to know those for the test. All right, the furthest one to the north are the Bahama Islands. And there are hundreds of islands in the Bahama Islands. Many of them you cannot even see. Although there are about 800 islands in the Bahamas, only about 20 of them are actually inhabitable, in other words, livable. Cuba is the next island going south. Cuba, of course, is the largest island in the Caribbean, and this one has had an interesting past. We talked about the Cold War and how the Soviet Union put missiles in Cuba and converted to communism, and just last year we finally kind of opened up that Cold War era of trade embargoes and other sorts of things. So now we have a Cuban embassy in the United States, and there's a U.S. embassy in Cuba. South of Cuba is the island of Jamaica. Both Bahamas and Jamaica, remember, do not speak Spanish, so English is used there. So that tells you kind of the history of the colonization. And yes, although in Jamaica they speak English, of course, they have a dialect no different than Australian English. The next island is a large island, but it's split into two countries. On the west side, you have the country of Haiti. Haiti is considered to be the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It has a poor economic structure. It's got poor education. Housing is pretty poor. And a few years ago, there was a devastating earthquake, and I don't know if you remember that or not, but that earthquake, it would normally destroy a lot of countries, buildings, and infrastructure and so forth, but this one did more damage simply because it was in a poor country, and so they have no money to actually fix the buildings or to rebuild the government or the educational system and so forth. So again, this was in 2010 of March. And if my photos load up, I'll just show you a few of the photos. Okay, they appear to not be loading, or at least not fast enough. But hopefully you remember that. We did a lot of things here in the United States to send money to Haiti, and a lot of celebrities did some benefits to raise money to send that to Haiti. On the west side of the island of Hispaniola is the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic is not as poor as Haiti. And as a matter of fact, in 2001, I took a couple of union students to the Dominican Republic in August. And so we're going to just kind of go through some of this information. So the Dominican Republic is on the island of Hispaniola. The capital is Santo Domingo, as you can see here. And the trip that I took were for 2 agricultural students that were in FFA. So the capital is Santo Domingo. They're 85th largest country in the world as far as population. Area, they're not very big, so they're 131st in the world. They do practice Catholicism. They speak Spanish. Their literacy rate is not horrible, but clearly not as good as the United States at 87%. And their life expectancy, again, is a little bit lower than the United States at 72 and 76. All right, so this is the group that went to the Dominican Republic, and it was an ag trip. So this is Becky Ward and Nicole Steffen, and so we were there representing Union FFA, and there are other students there from Indiana, Chicago, I think there was one other place, but that's where primarily these FFA organizations were from. And this here was Luis, our translator, which was a lifesaver, obviously, as we were traveling. So for 7 of the 10 days, we stayed on a campus of this Institut Superior de Agricultura, and this is where we were housed. And there weren't bars on the windows because we were locked in, but because the electricity was shut off at 7 o'clock every night, and so they didn't want anybody falling out of these open air windows or doors because there was no air conditioning. So a lot of open windows. They did have ceiling fans, but they, of course, didn't work without electricity. The other thing is you can see this rectangular thing on the top of these two pictures. That is what housed the water. There was no hot water heaters, and so our showers in the morning were quite interesting. They were never really hot showers. We had a shared bathroom, so 2 rooms were connected, and we ended up having quite a few little visitors, lots of spiders, geckos, and so forth, because again, there aren't any windows and it's not sealed up. And remember, this is a tropical climate. So we went out one evening and we went to this club where they were dancing the merengue, and we were being taught how to dance the merengue. And so Luis was trying to teach me to dance the merengue, and the merengue is the national music and dance, is the name of both, of the Dominican Republic, and I was awful at it. All right, this was an ag trip, and I learned a lot. I am a city slicker at heart, and so I am not a farm kid. So I learned a lot about farming and agriculture. So pineapples, obviously it gets its name because it kind of looks like a pine cone, and the pineapple plants look like the top of a fresh pineapple. If you've ever been in the store and seen a fresh pineapple, you've seen the top. Literally, if you cut that top off and planted it, it would grow into this plant. Only one pineapple at a time grows. Hawaii, of course, makes a lot of pineapple, but so does Mexico, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, the Philippines, Thailand, Costa Rica, and China, and other parts of Asia. So these cute little pineapples, one grow at a time. So you have this whole field of these rows of the pineapples, and I tell you, it was the best pineapple I've ever eaten, and I have been in Hawaii. Bananas. It's not actually a banana tree. That's a misnomer. It's a banana plant because it doesn't have any bark. It's considered to be an herb because the banana is actually a seed. So we went to a banana plantation. Here you can see the pod that is grown, and then here's the bunches, and then they bag them and they cut them green and they put them on this railing over here back to the station here, and they wash them off, and then they're shipped off green. Rice. Again, it was grown in the Dominican Republic, not really what you think of as rice, but again, the rice paddies, so it has the wet soil underneath and so forth. Coffee. The coffee here supposedly is some of the best in the world. I'm not a big coffee connoisseur, but we went here, and again, these coffee plants are grown on the side of the mountain underneath these other trees, and they say coffee that's grown in the shade has a different flavor than coffee that's grown in the sun. Some other things that they grew, and this was probably my favorite, was cacao. Now cacao, these pods right here, actually makes cocoa or chocolate. And so these are all the countries that produce it. The Dominican Republic is not at the top, but you can see for it being such a small country, it seriously plays a role in the chocolate production. So you pick these pods when they're orange, you break it open and it has this clump of seeds, and you break it off into individual seeds, you roast them, and then they look like this, and then they grind them and add sugar and other ingredients to make what you and I know as chocolate. Fresh coconuts. Again, coconut tree and a palm tree, those are two different things. The coconut milk, again, it tastes like water that has had bark soaking in it for a little bit, but it's very healthy for you. And the fresh coconut, not nearly as good as the bag coconut because of sugar. Avocados. They grew a lot of avocados, so we went to an avocado plantation. We went to a rum factory. Brugal is the rum that they make in the Dominican Republic. They do not export it because they drink it all themselves. But it's used from pressed sugar cane. So we saw the whole factory from seeing the sugar cane to seeing it being pressed to seeing it being bottled and labeled. Cigars, obviously Cuban cigars are most well known, but Dominicans are also well known. This is the Cuban or the Dominican cigar factory, and it was all done by hand. This was a huge business because you have to have a lot of people to do. Other things that I got to sample that I really hadn't sampled before, I ate a fresh papaya. Wasn't my favorite. Definitely enjoyed the pineapple a lot more. And we got to have a fresh pina colada, non-alcoholic, of course, school function. One day we went to Santo Domingo, which is the capital of the Dominican Republic and is considered to be one of the oldest European settlements in the Americas, because this is where Christopher Columbus apparently landed, and so there's a lot of history there. And so the day we were there, we got to visit the presidential palace, which is like the Capitol. You can see all of us there in front of the building. And again, it was an FFA trip, so they were to wear their FFA jackets if they had them. Inside is a lot like our Capitol, where, elaborate paintings and chandeliers and fancy furniture and marble staircases. And so again, it was a pretty interesting tour that we got to go around and see. We sat at the table where real leaders from world countries come and visit the Dominican Republic. And so that was pretty interesting. We toured around Santo Domingo a little bit more, and we came across the Calle Las Damas, which is considered to be the oldest street in the Americas. And again, because it was European, not because roads didn't exist before, but definitely more colonized at this point. Here are several statues of Christopher Columbus and Christopher Columbus's son's house at the top there. Of course, now it's just a museum. And again, Colon is the Spanish word for Columbus. We got to go inside one of the oldest churches in Americas, and again, this would be a Catholic church, and this was established in 1523. Remember, Columbus sailed in 1492, and so this is, of course, after that. The girls could not go in the church, though, because they were wearing a tank top and their shorts were too short, so they weren't allowed in, so I took several pictures for them as well. We also got to go to the Amber Museum, and the only reason why that was really cool is because the real piece of amber that was used in the Jurassic Park movie, the original one, where they had the mosquito that they got the blood from to make the dinosaurs, was in this museum. And again, amber is not really, it's not really a mineral or a gem. It's actually hardened tree sap, and so that's how the bug got caught in there. We drove by Sammy Sosa's house, and those of you that are baseball fans, he played for the Chicago Cubs, I don't know how many years, but quite a bit, and he was even in the running for the home run leader for a long time. And also then he got traded and he played for a little while somewhere else, but now he's not playing baseball. A lot of good baseball players come from the Dominican Republic. This was a fortress, which again, of course, it was there to protect it in earlier times. Those are the ancient cannons and so forth. And it was overlooking the water so that anybody that would come towards them, they could protect themselves. One day we actually had to do some community service, so we planted some trees at an elementary school near Hanako. And then after that, we actually got to have a river barbecue, so we grilled right there along the river. I don't know that I would call it a river, it's more like a large creek, but it did have pretty good current, and one of the favorite things to do was kind of to body surf down the current and then get out and walk back up. I did that several times, and I hit my knee really hard on a rock and got a nice little injury from that. So this is the crew out there in the river, and again, it wasn't very deep at all. We also got to visit a Carnival museum. Now, Brazil is well known for their Carnival, which is huge celebrations and parades and parties and beads and decorating. And every city has kind of a unique looking mask. And so this city's masks kind of looks like a duck bill with some funky ears. So every year they make these masks and they parade, and then they have them up in this museum. The last 3 days, we got to say, at an all-inclusive resort in the Dominican Republic at Puerto Plata at Correal Marion Resort. And, 2 pools, food, drinks all day, all night. You could, there was a beach on the Caribbean, just pretty much anything you wanted there, you could have. And so this is just things that we did. Played some volleyball, the girls got their hair braided, and our last day was spent on the beach. All right, so a lot of the things in the Dominican Republic are the same as they are in other countries. So just because I talked about pineapple or rice or coffee in the Dominican Republic, you can pretty much generalize that a lot of these countries do the same sorts of things as well, or grow the same sorts of things. All right, let's continue labeling our map. To the west of the Dominican Republic is Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico technically is not independent. I mean, they kind of govern themselves, but remember they are a Commonwealth of the United States, and so we have kind of power over them, if you will. The next group of islands here, all of these are the Virgin Islands, and they are actually divided into 2 groups. The UK, or the United Kingdom Virgin Islands, and the US Virgin Islands. Now, there are 3 main islands in the U.S. Virgin Islands: St. Thomas, St. Croix, C-R-O-I-X, and St. John's. And so those are the 3 main islands in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And these islands here to the south of the Virgin Islands, 2 islands by the name of Trinidad and Tobago. And so they're one country, but 2 different islands. All right, moving to our last map. Again, you don't need to label the Caribbean Sea, Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean if you don't want to. Those are there for reference points. So we're starting at 12 o'clock. We have the country of Venezuela. Venezuela has a lot of oil to the north in the Caribbean Sea. So oil is a huge product that they have. They also have some deposits of gold as well, which is why a lot of the Spaniards came to colonize South America, because of the gold. And again, you've seen like the Disney movie El Dorado, searching for that gold city in Middle America or South America. Next we have Colombia, and Colombia is the country that is actually connected to Panama or Middle America. Colombia, of course, is well known more for 2 things. One, having a lot of women that end up winning the Miss Universe contest, and so that's kind of the claim to fame there. But also they're more well known for the cocaine industry, and that's where a lot of the illegal drugs like cocaine come from into the United States via Mexico. Then we have Ecuador, and Ecuador is really a country that means literally equator, because this line of latitude right here is the equator. So that word Ecuador is Spanish for equator. The capital of Ecuador is Quito, and Quito is almost right on the equator, but it's high up in the mountains. So it's one of the unique places in the world where you can throw a snowball over the equator instead of it being hot and humid like you would expect along the equator. Peru. Peru, you read about Ecuador and Peru in chapter 11. Machu Picchu is in Peru, and they talked about Lima, which is the capital of Peru. Peru is, again, the location of the ancient Incans, and this little lake right here between Peru and Bolivia is kind of a unique name, and the lake there is the highest navigable lake in the world. It's called Lake Titicaca, Titicaca. And again, a name like that, hopefully you don't forget the name of that lake. We have Chile, of course, the long country along the western border. And in the north, you have the Atacama Desert, which is a location of a lot of copper and so forth. And to the south, you can see that a lot of islands here, and the southern tip of South America is called Tierra del Fuego, and they share this tip with Argentina. So Tierra del Fuego is shared by Chile and Argentina. Argentina is one of those countries that agriculturally is very similar to Iowa. Iowa is about right here, 42 degrees north, and this is about 42 degrees south. And so in this area here, they're going to get the same kind of climate, you know, the 4 seasons, the same heat in the summer and cool in the winter. So they grow a lot of corn. They also have a lot of cattle. And so, again, they have a lot of similarities to Iowa. Next, we have Uruguay. And Uruguay is obviously a very small country. But we actually had a foreign exchange student from Uruguay not too long ago. And that's where I've got the currency from Uruguay on my bulletin board. Middle country here is Paraguay. Paraguay and Bolivia look like they're landlocked, which means they don't have a border on an ocean. Bolivia is really the only one that's landlocked. Paraguay is connected via a river, and so they actually can get imports and exports out pretty easily. Moving up, the biggest country in South America is Brazil. Remember that they do not speak Spanish. They actually speak Portugal or Portuguese because Portugal settled them. It's also the location of the Summer Olympics this summer. Then next, we have 3 countries at the top. We have French Guiana, which of course is colonized by France and actually is technically controlled still by France. The reason why they colonized this is because of an island called Devil's Island off of the coast of French Guiana, which was used to send really bad prisoners from France to there. In the middle, you have Suriname, and Suriname is a country that does not speak Spanish as well. They speak Dutch, and Guyana is the last country on our map. On Monday, I'll talk about Guyana, and we'll talk a little bit about a significant historical event that happened there that has connections back to the United States.